Tell me about a time you went beyond your assigned task. Introduction. This is a common behavioral interview question for software developers, backend developers, full-stack developers, senior developers, and team leads. Interviewers ask this question to understand priorities, whether you think like an owner. This question is especially important for Java developers, backend developers, Spring Boot developers, full-stack developers, junior software developers, senior software developers, team leads, agile teams. The best way to answer this question is by using the STAR method. STAR means S, situation, explain the background. T, task, explain your responsibility. A, action, explain what you personally did. R, result, explain the final outcome. A good interview answer usually spends 10% situation, 10% task, 60% action, 20% result. The most important part is the action section, because interviewers want to understand what extra value you added, why it mattered, and how it helped the team or business. Question. Tell me about a time you went beyond your assigned task. Example 1. Adding documentation beyond API implementation situation. In one sprint, I was assigned to build a new Spring Boot API for customer search. My assigned task was mainly to implement the backend endpoint with filters, pagination, sorting, validation, and authorization. Task. My responsibility was to complete the API development and unit testing. However, while working on the feature, I noticed that front-end developers and QA would need clear examples to integrate and test the API correctly. Action. After completing the core implementation, I went beyond the assigned coding task and created practical API documentation. I documented: check endpoint URL, check HTTP method, check request parameters, check required and optional fields, check pagination behavior, check sorting behavior, check empty result response, check validation errors, check authorization rules, check sample request JSON, check sample response JSON. I also added examples for successful search, successful no matching records, successful filter, successful access. Then I shared the documentation with the front-end developer and QA. I asked them to review it and tell me if any example was unclear. Based on their feedback, I added a clearer pagination example and field-level validation error example. Result. Front-end integration became smoother. QA created test scenarios faster because the expected API behavior was clear. The product owner also had more confidence during demo because the API behavior was easy to explain. Why this answer works. This answer is strong because it shows initiative beyond coding, API documentation, front-end and QA support, clear communication, quality improvement, ownership mindset. Example 2. Adding regression tests beyond the immediate fix situation. In one project, QA reported a bug in a backend API where an optional field caused an error when it was missing from the request. My assigned task was to fix that specific bug. Task. I needed to correct the null handling issue and get the story ready for QA retesting. Action. I first reproduced the issue locally using QA's payload. Then I fixed the null safe handling. But instead of only fixing the exact failing scenario, I reviewed related validation paths to see if similar edge cases existed. I added regression tests for check, optional field present, check, optional field missing, check, invalid optional field value, check, required field missing, check, valid request, check, invalid request behavior. I also reviewed similar APIs that used the same validation pattern. I found one other area where the same issue could potentially happen later. I updated that logic as well and added tests. Then I communicated the broader improvement to QA so they knew which extra scenarios were covered. Result. The original bug was fixed. The additional tests helped prevent similar issues in related flows. QA had more confidence because the fix covered the root pattern, not only the one failing example. Why this answer works. This answer is good because it shows Click going beyond the direct bug fix. Click regression testing. Click pattern recognition. Click QA collaboration. Click quality ownership. Click prevention mindset. Example 3. Helping QA with test scenarios situation. In one sprint, I developed a feature that included role-based access, validation, and different error responses. My assigned task was backend development. However, QA was new to that area of the application and was not familiar with all the edge cases. Task. My direct responsibility was to complete the backend implementation, but I saw an opportunity to help QA test the feature more effectively. Action. After finishing the API, I created a short test scenario guide for QA. The guide included happy path scenario, invalid input scenario, missing required field, unauthorized user, forbidden role, empty result, duplicate request, boundary values, expected status codes, expected response messages. I also explained which scenarios were most important because of business risk. For example, I highlighted role-based access because incorrect access could create a security issue. I reviewed the scenarios with QA and answered their questions. I also added test data examples so they could reproduce each case quickly. Result: QA testing became more efficient. They found one minor validation issue before production. The feature was released with better confidence, and the test guide became a useful reference for similar features later. Why this answer works? This answer is strong because it shows supporting QA beyond assigned task, test scenario thinking, security awareness, collaboration, improving release quality, team-first mindset. Example 4. Improving logging while fixing a bug situation. In one production support task, I was assigned to fix a backend issue where users sometimes received a generic error message. The immediate task was to identify and fix the bug. Task. I needed to fix the root cause, but during investigation I noticed that the logs did not include enough context to troubleshoot similar issues quickly in the future. Action. I fixed the immediate bug first. Then I went beyond the assigned task by improving the logging around that flow. I added correlation ID logging, endpoint name, safe business identifier, validation failure reason, downstream service response status, processing step information, clear error category. I made sure not to log sensitive data. I also updated the error handling so support teams could identify whether the issue was caused by validation, missing data, downstream timeout, or unexpected failure. Then I documented how to search logs using the correlation ID. Result: the immediate bug was fixed. Future troubleshooting became faster because logs had better context. Support teams could provide more useful information when escalating issues to developers. Why this answer works? This answer is good because it shows production support mindset, logging improvement, observability, security awareness, beyond the ticket ownership, long-term support improvement. Example 5. Creating a reusable component situation. In one project, I was assigned to implement validation logic for one new API. While working on the task, I noticed that multiple APIs had similar validation rules implemented separately. Task. My assigned task was only to add validation for the new API. However, I saw that duplicating the same logic again would create long-term maintenance problems. Action. I first completed the required validation for the new API. Then I discussed with the team whether it made sense to extract the common validation into a reusable component. After getting agreement, I created a shared validator for common rules. The reusable validator handled required field checks, format validation, boundary checks, common error codes, user-friendly validation messages, reusable unit tests. I kept API-specific rules separate so the shared component did not become too generic or confusing. I also updated the new API and one related API to use the shared validator. Then I documented when to use the validator and when not to use it. Result:
the team avoided adding more duplicate validation logic.
Future API changes became easier because common rules were centralized. The code became cleaner and easier to maintain. Why this answer works? This answer is strong because it shows: check, initiative, refactoring mindset, reusable design, technical judgment, maintainability improvement, collaboration before changing scope. Example 6. Supporting a teammate who is blocked situation. In one sprint, I finished my assigned backend task earlier than expected. Another teammate was blocked on integrating with a downstream service because the API contract was unclear. Task. My assigned task was complete, but the team's sprint goal was still at risk because my teammate's work was blocked. Action. I offered to help. First, I reviewed the integration requirement and the downstream API documentation with my teammate. We identified unclear areas such as request payload, required headers, authentication method, timeout behavior, error responses, test data, environment availability. I helped contact the downstream team and set up a quick clarification discussion. After the meeting, I helped document the confirmed contract. I also helped my teammate create mock responses so development could continue while waiting for the real QA endpoint. I made sure I was supporting the work, not taking over their task. Result: the teammate became unblocked. The integration work continued without waiting for the downstream environment. The sprint goal stayed on track, and the team had better documentation for future integrations. Why this answer works? This answer is good because it shows helping beyond assigned work, teamwork, cross-team communication, dependency management, respectful support, focus on team success. Example 7. Creating a deployment checklist situation. In one release, a feature depended on a new environment variable, database script, and smoke test steps. My assigned work was backend implementation, but I noticed that release readiness involved several manual checks. Task. I wanted to reduce the risk of deployment issues by helping the team prepare better. Action. After completing the backend work, I created a simple deployment checklist. The checklist included code merged, pull request approved, database script reviewed, environment variables confirmed, feature flag confirmed, QA testing completed, smoke test steps prepared, rollback steps documented, monitoring dashboard checked, support contact identified. I reviewed the checklist with QA, DevOps, and the release manager. We found that one environment variable had not yet been configured in the production environment. Because we found it before deployment, DevOps updated it ahead of time. Result: the deployment went smoothly. The team avoided a configuration issue that could have caused a production failure. The checklist was reused for later releases. Why this answer works? This answer is strong because it shows release ownership, proactive risk reduction, DevOps collaboration, checklist creation, production readiness, going beyond assigned development work. Example 8. Improving onboarding material situation. In one team, new developers often needed help setting up the application locally. The setup involved Java, Maven, Docker, database configuration, environment variables, and dependent services. My assigned tasks were feature development, not onboarding documentation. Task. I noticed that repeated setup questions were taking time from both new developers and senior team members. I decided to improve the onboarding documentation. Action. I went through the local setup process from the perspective of a new developer. I documented. Check. Required Java version, Maven setup, Docker setup, database startup, environment variables, application configuration, service startup order, test data setup, health check URLs, common errors, troubleshooting steps. I included exact commands where useful. Then, I asked a newer team member to follow the guide. When they found unclear steps, I updated the document. I also added a last review date and owner so the guide would not become outdated silently. Result: new developers could set up the application faster. Senior developers received fewer repeated setup questions. The documentation improved team productivity and onboarding experience. Why this answer works. This answer is good because it shows initiative, documentation, onboarding improvement, team productivity, continuous improvement, long-term thinking. Best short answer version. If you need a short interview answer, you can say, in one sprint, I was assigned to build a Spring Boot customer search API with filters, pagination, sorting, validation, and authorization. My main responsibility was backend implementation and unit testing. After completing the core API, I realized that front-end developers and QA would need clear examples to integrate and test it properly. So I went beyond my assigned task and created API documentation with request parameters, response examples, pagination behavior, validation rules, authorization rules, and error responses. I also added examples for successful search, empty results, invalid filters, unauthorized access, and forbidden access. I shared the documentation with the front-end developer and QA and updated it based on their feedback. As a result, front-end integration was smoother. QA created test scenarios faster, and the product owner had more confidence during the sprint demo. It showed me that going beyond the coding task can improve overall team delivery. Common mistakes to avoid. 1. Making it sound like you ignored your assigned work. Bad answer. I stopped working on my task and helped with something else. Better answer. I completed my assigned work first, then added extra value that supported the team. 2. Taking over someone else's task. Bad answer. I took over my teammates' work because they were slow. Better answer. I supported my teammate by helping clarify the blocker while respecting their ownership. 3. Doing extra work without alignment. Bad answer. I refactored a large part of the system without telling anyone. Better answer. I discussed the improvement with the team first and kept the extra work focused. 4. No business or team impact. Bad answer. I added extra code because I wanted to improve it. Better answer. I added documentation and tests that helped QA, front-end integration, and future maintenance. 5. Over-engineering. Bad answer. I built a full framework even though the story only needed a small change. Better answer. I made a small, reusable improvement that solved the current need and reduced future duplication. Best practices for answering this question. Use the STAR method. Show that you completed your assigned work. Explain what gap you noticed. Explain why the extra work mattered. Avoid sounding like you ignored priorities. Mention collaboration or alignment. Keep the extra effort practical. Show team or business impact. End with a positive result. Highlight ownership and initiative. What interviewers are looking for. Interviewers want to see whether you can take initiative, think beyond your own ticket, support the team, improve quality, reduce future problems, communicate before expanding scope, balance extra effort with priorities. For senior roles, they also want to see technical leadership, proactive risk reduction, mentoring or team support, maintainability thinking, release readiness awareness, documentation ownership, ability to improve team processes. Strong words to use in your answer. You can use words like key noticed, key volunteered, key supported, key improved, key documented, key added coverage, key reduced risk, key helped unblock, key created reusable solution, key coordinated, key aligned, key prevented, key improved efficiency. Example. After completing my assigned API work, I noticed that QA and front-end needed clearer examples, so I created documentation and test scenarios that improved integration and reduced repeated questions. Good beyond assigned task topics you can use. Depending on your experience, you can talk about. Check. API documentation after implementation. Check. Extra regression tests. Helping QA with test scenarios. Check. Improving logging. Check. Creating reusable validator. Check. Helping a block teammate. Check. creating deployment checklist. Check. Improving onboarding guide. Check. Adding monitoring dashboard. Check. Improving error messages. Troubleshooting notes. Supporting release validation. Cleaning up duplicate code. Helping front-end integration. Reviewing related edge cases. Final summary. Tell me about a time you went beyond your assigned task is an important interview question because strong developers do more than just complete tickets. The best answer should include: check what your assigned task was. Check what gap or opportunity you noticed. Check why it mattered. Check what extra action you took. Check how you kept it aligned with priorities. Check who benefited. Check what result improved. Good examples include creating API documentation, adding extra regression tests, helping QA, improving logging, creating reusable validation, helping a blocked teammate, creating a deployment checklist, improving onboarding documentation. The strongest answers show initiative, ownership, practical judgment, teamwork, and measurable improvement.